So good to have you join us today. I'm Lee Ji-yoon, and you're watching Business Daily. We have a lot lined up for you today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. More Koreans are turning to import beef instead of Hanu or Korean native-bred cattle due to surging prices on the back of dwindling supply. The speed and scope of the fall in oil prices have been stunning, and some say that cheaper oil no longer translates into stronger economic growth for countries as it did in the past. We sit down with an expert to talk about this. But first, the global economy. Despite aggressive efforts of central banks around the globe to reach a 2% inflation target, that's proving to be an elusive goal. Several leading economies marked zero or even minus growth in prices for goods and services in September on year. The Eurozone and the UK both registered a negative 0.1% growth, the economic bloc's first minus reading in 6 months, and Britain's second minus growth since 1960. Prices in the U.S. also took a dip by 0.2%, while Korea's figure landed in positive territory at 0.6%, although still in the 0% range for the 10th month. Korea's central bank, in lockstep with those of other countries, expects the downward pressures to linger into next year. The Financial Times pointed to China's 43rd consecutive month of falling producer prices for injecting deflationary pressures on the world economy. The driving force behind economic growth here in Korea, backed by the country's largest conglomerates, is slowly waning, spurring worries that heavy reliance on mega corporations could seriously challenge the local economy. Our Shin Sa-min has this report.
An economy dependent on mega conglomerates. Korea's top 30 business groups generated 207 trillion won, or over 183 billion US dollars in value added last year, but that's down 0.6% from the year before, signaling trouble. A report by CEO Score, an online corporate productivity evaluation company, indicates the value added by all business units of the largest 30 conglomerates backtracked by 0.5 percentage point in GDP contribution. What used to stand at over 15% last year ticked down to 14.6%. This comes as performance at the country's leading firms has sunk on the back of slowing demand both home and abroad. The total value added includes net profits, labor and rental costs, as well as depreciated costs. By firms, Samsung Group registered the largest amount in value added at nearly $60 billion. Its leading arm, Samsung Electronics, posted $34 billion, a near 14% drop on year, dragging down the country's GDP by 0.45%. Hyundai Motor and POSCO generated nearly $30 and $7 billion, respectively.
Ultimately, it boils down to creating new industries that will drive up growth. And we can see that happen by reforming the structure of sectors so that firms across the board can prosper evenly.
Citing Nokia and the blow it dealt to the Finnish economy, experts say relying on the success of large corporations cannot sustain the local economy in the long run, adding that a structural transformation should take place as early as possible. Shin Sa-min, Business Daily.
Meanwhile, Korea's Hyundai Motor posted strong sales in Brazil and 3 other emerging markets in September, raising its market share in the so-called BRIMS to a record high. According to data from each nation's automobile association, Hyundai Motor's combined sales in Brazil, Russia, India, and Mexico came to nearly 76,000 units last month. Now, that accounts for more than 11% of the 676,000 vehicles sold in the countries and marks the 8th straight month that Hyundai has registered a double-digit market share. Last year, the Korean automaker's average market share in BRIMS was 8.8%. Hyundai's strong sales were driven by steady demand for its customized models, such as the small SUV Creta in India and the Solaris subcompact in Russia. Former vice chairman of Lotte Holding Shin Dong-ju has proposed a solution to resolve the bitter fight with his younger brother and Lotte Group chairman Shin Dong-bin over control of the retail giant. Shin Dong-ju said he would like to revert back to the original state of management at Lotte by overseeing the Japanese unit and financially supporting Korean operations managed by his younger brother. But he added that Dongbin has been unwilling to reach a compromise. As for who will lead the group in the future, Dong-ju said his father and founder of Lotte, Shin Gyuk-ho, should ultimately make the decision. If you're in Korea, you might have experienced the convenience of the cab-hailing app Kakao Taxi. And by the end of this month, there will be a high-end option dubbed Kakao Taxi Black if you feel like splurging a bit on your taxi ride. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
A man nicely dressed in a suit greets his customer.
반갑습니다. 안녕하세요. 예, 신촌 가시는 고객님 맞으십니까? 예, 안내해드리겠습니다.
He even opens the door and puts safety first.
고객님, 안전을 위해 안전벨트 착용 부탁드립니다.
Kakao, operator of Korea's most popular messenger app KakaoTalk, has joined hands with a local taxi association to launch a high-end taxi service.
Our training was focused on being friendly and not refusing to accept customers. Kindness comes first, and then comes safety.
The service operates in the same way as Kakao's existing cab-hailing app Kakao Taxi that was launched in March, allowing a smartphone user to request a ride to a certain destination. The base rate starts at 8,000 won, or roughly $7, which is quite pricey compared to a regular cab. For instance, when traveling roughly 10 kilometers, it would cost less than $10 for a regular taxi, $14 for a luxury cab, and about $23 for a Kakao Taxi Black. The service is seen as a way to create new profit sources for Kakao amid weak profit concerns.
There's growing demand for more convenient services, even if it means paying a higher price. This is just the beginning. We believe it can later be used for tourism matters down the line.
The official launch is expected at the end of this month. But whether it will achieve success remains to be seen, as there have been criticism that the prices are too high, placing a burden on passengers, while the service also eats into the businesses of luxury cabs already in operation. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
One year and 4 months. That's how long global oil prices have been falling. But despite the sliding prices, demand for crude remains low, and major oil exporters in the Middle East are pumping around 2 million more barrels per day than needed at the moment. So, is cheap oil a blessing or a bane for Korea? Let's find out.
Since 2014, the price of Dubai crude oil, which accounts for over 80% of Korea's oil imports, has dropped by nearly half, with annual average prices falling under $60 per barrel this year. The slide initially led to positive speculation that it will give a boost to Korea's economy. Korean think tanks a few months ago said the country's growth would rise by an additional 0.2 percentage points every time global oil prices slid 10%. So it's no secret that Seoul had high hopes for low oil prices and what that would mean for the economy.
We must use the fall in oil prices as a chance to revitalize the economy by boosting actual income levels and domestic spending.
But cheap oil has in fact been hurting Korean companies in the petroleum business, as well as those in the industries of steel, machinery, and heavy equipment. With continual low demand and a global oil glut, how will the global economy in Korea turn things around to make the most out of falling oil prices?
And to tell us more about this, we're now joined by Kim Il-sun, Senior Fellow of the Asia Institute at Sookmyung Women's University. Welcome to the program.
Well, good to be here.
All right, so when we say global crude prices, we're talking about Brent, Dubai, WTI. But tell us more about these markets and how prices are determined.
Sure, traditionally, the price of crude oil is set by the supply side. So if there is more demand and less supply, obviously the price goes up. Mm-hmm. The opposite would bring the price down. There are three primary benchmarks for setting up the crude oil prices globally. They are, as you said, West Texas Intermediate, WTI, and Brent blend, and Dubai crude. You know, the OPEC reference basket, or the OPEC basket, is also the average prices of the petroleum produced by 13 OPEC countries. So they all make up the prices of the crude oil around the world. And the price of oil is set through the trades at different exchanges around the world, such as New York Mercantile Exchange and Europe's Intercontinental Exchange, or ICE. And they're also influenced by the futures market and options trading. There are so many different variables that set the price.
Mm-hmm. All right, then how are things really looking for global oil prices? I mean, why are prices continuing to fall?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, the current price of oil is at all-time low in past 5 years or so. It's about less than $60 these days, and compared to over compared to over $100 in the past 5 years time period, it's a drastic decrease. In the middle of 2014, about a year from today, the prices continue to drop because there is a more supply of oil produced by United States oil producers, as well as drastic reduction in the oil consumption in emerging countries such as China and India. And back in the January 2015, about 6 months ago, the price of the benchmark crude oil dropped to about less than $50, which was unthinkable. And on, I recall, August 24th, 2015, it reached a price of $38, which was a crazy price. Compared to 120 back in the 5 years ago, you're talking about one-third of the price. The reason why the price of the oil is dropping so much is not because there is so much more supply. Actually, it's drastic decrease in the demand side. Because the China, for example, which is the biggest importer of crude oil around the world, they are losing the consumption rate drastically, which in turn creates a domino effect to other industries and other economies in the world, because the less consumption of crude oil in China means less production and less revenue for other industries as well.
All right, then have we seen something like this before in the past? And if we did, then how did it impact the Korean economy back then?
Sure, Korea. Let's start from the what the low oil price mean. You know, low crude oil price means less price for imported goods, and then it triggers to have a less price for domestic goods as well. And in turn, it creates a real income and creates the higher spending for many average citizens out there. You know, this also increases the lowering of the interest rate, and higher spending, higher investment, and higher export rates if the price of the crude oil is less. You know, back in the 80s in Korea, we experienced a drastically low oil price at the time for about 10 years. Actually, we experienced about 3 different lows: low oil prices, low interest rate, and low US dollars. All 3 low metrics jointly made a contribution to create a substantial growth for Korea at the time, back in the 80s.
All right, well then this fall in prices must have different impact on different sectors and industries.
Well, that's a very good question. You know, not every industry will gain the benefit of the low crude oil prices. For example, let's see, steel, shipbuilding, and petrochemical will actually take a hit because it means they will lose the revenue. Because the oil-rich countries in the Middle East and all those countries out there are the big-time buyers of the steel and ships, and with low oil prices, it means less revenue for those countries. It means lost revenue for those industries. But on the other hand, many other industries will enjoy the benefit of the low price because it means a less cost of manufacturing and less cost of goods sold, such as travel, logistics, and automobile will probably enjoy the big boost in the revenue side.
Right. Well, like we saw in the report, Korea had high hopes for low oil prices. But then looking at things right now, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that it has helped to revitalize the sluggish economy. Why so?
Well, because there is a good chance that the recent low oil prices may mean the declining growth in Korean economy. Why? Because the low oil prices mean, like I said, less revenue for the oil-rich countries. You know, Korea's a big revenue from the overseas market depend a lot on construction markets. And those oil-rich Middle East countries losing their revenue means losing the revenue for the Korean industries as well. You know, if the buyer doesn't have money, the seller of the construction will also lose the revenue. And these price of crude oil prices going down, we might actually experience deflation, low economic activity and low price of goods, not only in Korea, but around the other economies around the world as well.
All right. Well, OPEC recently said that because global oil prices have hit rock bottom, it's time for them to climb up again. But some say that this trend is going to continue up until next year. If so, if this continues, then how should Korea prepare in the long run?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the economic policy of Korean government, as well as the management strategy of many firms in Korea, needs to be changed because their thinking is based upon the price of oil at $100 per barrel, not these days $60 or $50 per barrel. So everything has to be changed. And you never know that when and if the crude oil price will actually end dropping and might just go up. So what you need to do as a government, you might want to look into alternative energy sources such as hydrogen, solar, and biofuel to expand its options. And for the industries, if you are the buyer of the crude oil, and for many years you've been buying the crude oil as a seller's market, now this is buyer's market. As the price goes down, the buyers will have more say in what to want. And if this is the case, this is a perfect time to demand a renegotiation of the contracts with the crude sellers and get the contract terms realigned for the benefit of Korea.
All right, so you actually use this time as an opportunity.
Sure.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today.
You're welcome.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day, everyone.